According to the ICRC, there are at least 120 armed conflicts in the world as we speak. These conflicts differ in their nature, historical origins, or geopolitical underpinnings. But they all have something in common: their deadly impact on civilians, children, women, journalists, or humanitarian workers. Since its creation in 2014, Geneva Peace Week has been taking place in these grim realities. But every year, the Peace Week comes back with the same energy and promise of hope. Because every year, organizations around the world and in Geneva act for peace. These organizations and the people that make them do not give up. We cannot give up. In spite of the dangers they are facing on the ground and uncertainties for their professional future, as many of them are caught in financial turmoil, peace builders remain committed to work towards a world that is directed not by fear, but by international law, which is the only guarantee against arbitrariness, raw power, and impunity. We, at the Geneva Peacebuilding Platform, along with our consortium and our supporters, are proud to offer you a week full of hope and concrete proposals to move forward. A week which testifies that peace is in action every day and everywhere, starting with this opening ceremony. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, welcome to Geneva Peace Week 2025. My name is Anissa Bellal, and I'm honored to be the Master of Ceremonies for tonight's beautiful opening. Tonight's event will be divided in 4 parts. We will start with 2 official speeches delivered by the representatives of our 2 co-organizers, the Swiss Federal Department of Foreign Affairs and the UN Office at Geneva. We will then hear the peace message that the International Committee of the Red Cross would like to convey to us. Because of the high stakes we are facing today in Geneva and beyond, our entire board will lead the central debate with their insights and practical way forward. We will conclude our evening with the youth message, which will be delivered by a representative of the Peacebuilding Initiative from the Geneva Graduate Institute. So it is now my pleasure and honor to welcome on stage our first speaker, Ambassador Alexander Fazel, State Secretary for Foreign Affairs at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Switzerland.
Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs, chers amis et collègues. It is a great honor to join you at the opening of the Geneva Peace Week 2025. Over the past decade, this gathering has become one of the most important platforms for dialogue and reflection on peace and conflict. It brings together diplomats, practitioners, academics, and civil society from all across the world. And it does so here in Geneva, a city that has long been a meeting place for dialogue, cooperation, and the pursuit of peace. When the Geneva Peace Week was first launched, the international community was already grappling with growing instability. But since then, the world has changed profoundly. Geopolitical tensions keep rising. trust among major powers is at its lowest in decades. Conflicts are becoming more fragmented and more complex. Civilians pay the highest price, from Ukraine to Gaza, from Sudan to Myanmar. At the same time, global challenges transcend borders. Climate change, pandemics, and the disruptive potential of artificial intelligence are reshaping societies and security landscapes. These dynamics make the Geneva Peace Week more relevant than ever, because in a context where crises are multifaceted, where threats are interlinked, where inequalities are widening, the world must move from dialogue to concrete action. Hence, this year's theme, Peace in Action. And it is an excellent fit for International Geneva, where politics and practitioners meet daily. This year also marks the centenary of the Locarno Conference in 1925. At that time, European leaders showed that even after years of mistrust and devastation, it is possible to come together to negotiate peace and security on their own initiative. The spirit of Locarno may not have solved all problems, but it demonstrated that with visionary political leadership, dialogue and compromise are possible even in difficult times. Today, as we face wars in several regions of the world, this lesson resonates strongly. It reminds us that when states, institutions, and societies choose to invest in peace, they can bend the course of history. The Geneva Peace Week, in its own way, carries forward that spirit by providing a platform where dialogue becomes action and where International Geneva continues to serve as a catalyst for innovation and solutions. Under the banner Peace in Action, the Geneva Peace Week 25 calls for adaptive, inclusive, and collaborative approaches to peace, emphasizing the urgency of reinforcing dialogue with action and emphasizing the urgency of putting commitments into practice. This means, one, elevating local actors and local communities so that the solutions are grounded and sustainable. Two, integrating humanitarian action, protection of civilians, and conflict prevention more directly into peace-building strategies. Three, addressing root causes, environment and climate change, food insecurity, inequalities, and the profound impact that massive human rights violations have on the outbreak of conflicts. And fourth, embracing innovation, new technologies, AI, arts and culture, narratives and storytelling as instruments for peace. So peace in action is not just a slogan, it is a call to adapt, to include, to deliver. This call is to all of you participating in this year's Geneva Peace Week. Switzerland's foreign policy is anchored in the values of humanity, human rights, the rule of law, and dialogue. These are not abstract ideals. They are the compass guiding our diplomacy and are rooted in Switzerland's constitution. These principles radiate from International Geneva into the world. Geneva is also the home of many actors that play a key role for peace. All of you in the room present today are a testimony of the richness of experience and practice Geneva has to offer to the world. For 25 years, the Geneva Centers, GCSP, DCAF, and GICHT, have been an integral part of the ecosystem of International Geneva. They embody Swiss values of dialogue, innovation, and reliability. They train leaders, set standards, support countries in strengthening peace and security. Like a Swiss Army knife, they are versatile, adaptable, and trusted ready to provide expertise wherever it is needed. In Geneva, we are also reminded that protecting human dignity must remain at the center of all our efforts. International humanitarian law, human rights law, and the Geneva Conventions are not optional. They are the backbone of our collective humanity. The presence of the ICRC, of the OHC, le Haut Commissariat aux droits de l'homme, the Human Rights Council, and many other organizations and mechanisms that aim to promote international law are another strong asset for Geneva's role for peace. But Geneva must also remain connected with other hubs and centers of international governance. In this regard, Switzerland is currently preparing for the chairmanship of the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe in 2026, when Geneva will meet Vienna. This will be a moment to reaffirm our commitment to dialogue and cooperation in Europe at a time when the conflict in Ukraine has brought devastating war back to the continent. For Switzerland, the principles of international law and the Helsinki Final Act remain indispensable. They are the very foundations of peace and security in Europe and beyond. But let us be honest, dialogue alone will not be enough. To remain relevant, peace efforts must evolve. Multilateralism is under pressure, yet it remains essential. We must defend and strengthen it while adapting it continuously. UN 80 is a challenge to what has already been achieved, but it is also an opportunity to make the UN future-proof. New technologies, especially AIs, bring opportunities for peace building, but also risks of disinformation, exclusion, and escalation. We must harness them responsibly. Climate change is not just an environmental issue. It is the driver of conflict and displacement. We must integrate it into peace and mediation strategies. And as resources for international cooperation shrink, we must build new partnerships across regions, across sectors, and non-traditional institutions. To remain relevant, peace actors, including the Geneva centers, international organizations, and networks like the Geneva Peace Week, cannot rest on their laurels. They must continue to adapt and innovate. They must maintain the highest standards in their fields, explore new partnerships, embrace the potential of technology without losing sight of the human dimension of the heart at peace. These steps will not always be easy, but they are essential to ensure that Geneva remains not only a hub of diplomacy, but a place where solutions for peace are imagined and implemented. Ladies and gentlemen, peace will never be a given. It must be nurtured, protected, and constantly reimagined. And just as the centenary of Locarno reminds us that peace can be crafted when there is political will, my hope is that this Geneva Peace Week will show us that peace can be advanced when there is collective action. Switzerland is proud to have supported the Geneva Peace Week since the very beginning and will continue to do so. And I wish you fruitful discussions, new partnerships, and renewed determination to turn peace from concept into practice. And with that, je vous dis au travail.
Thank you very much, State Secretary Fazel, for these powerful words and for the Switzerland's everlasting support to the Geneva Peacebuilding Platform and the Geneva Peace Week. I would like now to welcome on stage Mr. Alexander Zouev, who is the Acting Under-Secretary General for Counterterrorism, to deliver the official statement on behalf of the UN office at Geneva. Welcome.
Bonsoir à tout le monde, mesdames, messieurs, excellences. C'est un grand honneur pour moi de prendre la parole aujourd'hui en ma qualité de secrétaire général adjoint par intérim chargé de la lutte contre le terrorisme à l'occasion de la semaine de la paix 2025. Genève, comme je sais très bien, parce qu'à l'époque j'étais élevé dans cette ville-là, avec son hospitalité et son esprit d'ouverture, offre un cadre unique pour partager, apprendre et réfléchir ensemble à la paix et au dialogue. Et toujours merci beaucoup de votre accueil chaleureux. Je soutiens très fortement l'idée de Genève internationale et je tâche toujours de participer dans les réunions pareilles, surtout celui-ci au niveau. Maintenant, vous devez m'excuser, mais je dois faire quelques remarques en anglais. Je ne veux pas vous tourmenter avec mon russe, mais tout de même, je veux utiliser notre langage officiel de notre organisation. Allow me to convey, first of all, very warm greetings of my friend and my colleague, Ms. Tatiana Volovaya, Director General of the United Nations Office at Geneva. And I'm speaking, in fact, on behalf of both of us. I mean, as you can see from the all announcements made before. Unfortunately, she's on very important duty travel and she cannot join us today, but she definitely asked me to extend her deep appreciation to all partners, speakers, and participants gathered here. We also wish to express our gratitude to the co-organizers, the Geneva Peacebuilding platform, and of course, to the Federal Department of Foreign Affairs of the Swiss Confederation. For their unwavering commitment to bringing together such a diverse community around a shared vision of common and stable peace. Over the past decade, the Geneva Peace Week has become a unique platform for dialogue, reflection, and collaboration. It brings together not only diplomats and policymakers, but also scholars, artists, young leaders, and community leaders from around the world, all united by the conviction that peace must be lived, not merely hoped for. We gather this week under the steering theme, Peace in Action, a call not merely to reflect, but to do, and you just heard from the Secretary of State of Switzerland, his vision, how we should implement this peace in action, and we fully share the same values with the government of Switzerland, but with all other peace-loving countries. It is a responsibility to be pursued through concrete initiatives, partnerships, and courage. It must be forged deliberately and sustained continuously in our policies, our institutions, and most importantly, in our everyday choices. In a world marked by protracted conflicts, inequality, climate stress, mass displacement, rising polarization, and a persistent and evolving terrorism threat, the challenges to peace are daunting. Yet precisely in these times, the urgency of action becomes clearer than ever. Words, plans, frameworks, these are essential, but they must really lead to impact in lives, in relationships, in institutions, and they should make big difference for our final beneficiaries. Ladies and gentlemen, this year, as you know, we mark the 80th anniversary of the United Nations. A reminder that multilateral cooperation was born not in times of comfort, but in the immediate aftermath of very, very horrible war. At the same time, the Pact for the Future adopted last year calls us to strengthen our collective commitment, ensuring that peace efforts are inclusive, forward-looking, and resilient in the face of today's many important and serious challenges. Among its many priorities, the pact gives fresh momentum to global efforts to prevent and counter terrorism, what is very important for my new office, through whole of government and whole of society approaches that uphold human rights at all times, respond to the challenges and opportunities presented by new technologies, and foster closer collaboration with all regional organizations. These commitments recognize that sustainable peace and effective prevention require broad-based engagement across all sectors of society. Geneva Peace Week embodies this spirit and is more than a forum for discussion. It is a place where new ideas take root and partnerships begin, where words are transformed into concrete actions. Over the coming days, you will explore how peace can be advanced through education, technology, culture, mediation, justice, rule of law, mental health, and economic inclusion. Each of these conversations has the potential to inspire collaboration, inform policy, or inspire new approaches that brings us one step closer to a more peaceful and cooperative world. Let us be very bold in our ambitions, but also very realistic in our strategies. Let us prioritize inclusivity, especially of voices too often marginalized, women, youth, disabled people, local peace builders. Let us forge alliances across sectors with governments, NGOs, academia, the private sector. Let us commit to learning, to iterating, to course correction. Let us share risks and hold each other accountable. I am inspired by the program, which comprises over 80 events across panels, workshops, dialogues, art, and cultural expression. And just 10 days ago, I'm not reading already from my statement, just to inform you that in New York, during the high-level segment of our General Assembly, we calculated we had altogether 3,400 different events, multilateral events, side events, bilateral meetings by leaders like presidents, prime ministers, and royalties. So we understand how difficult to organize 80 events, and we praise you for these. Well, it is designed to have panels, workshops, dialogues, art and cultural expression. It is also designed to bridge theory and practice, Geneva in the field, policy and community. Well, may this week strengthen our collective commitment and resolve. May it catalyze new partnerships. May it inspire concrete initiatives that endure long beyond these halls. With that, I invite you to join me in committing to peace in action, not as a slogan, but as a lived, shared, common journey. It is now my great honor to invite the chair of the Geneva Peacebuilding platform to offer welcoming remarks. And I wish you all an inspiring and fruitful Geneva Peace Week. Merci beaucoup à tout le monde. Grazie mille. I'm looking around. Спасибо. Шише.
Thank you very much. Spasiba bolshoi, Mr. Zouev and the UN, to be our partner in Geneva for so many years to help us piece together. 2025 marks a special milestone for 3 of our board members as we celebrate 30 years of the GCSP, the Geneva Center for Security Policy, 25 years of DCAF, the Geneva Center for Security Sector Governance, accompanied in this celebration by their sister organization, GICHD, the Geneva Center for Humanitarian Demining. We are very proud that all 3 centers are members of the GPP board, and we thank them for their support. Here is a short video that was prepared by the center's teams and which will be followed by a message delivered by Ambassador Thomas Graminger, Director of the GCSP and President of the Board of the Geneva Peacebuilding Platform. So we are going to display the video now.
From Geneva's Maison de la Paix, 3 centers are transforming peace, security, and humanitarian action in a rapidly changing world. Beginning 30 years ago as a Swiss contribution to peace and security, they have contributed to Geneva's position as a global hub of expertise. As conflicts research and democratic values are challenged, they are part of a global solution. With a workforce of over 400 staff, the 3 centers have trained more than 14,000 people and produced 125 knowledge products in 2024. They have active programs in more than 60 countries to support national ownership, innovative approaches, and good practices. A strong online community of more than 365,000 followers enables them to reach thousands of people across the globe. The Geneva Peacebuilding Platform Foundation was founded by the Geneva Graduate Institute, GCSP, and DCAF. They support the Geneva Peace Week, welcoming around 4,000 participants every year. Beyond numbers, their impact is seen in the policies shaped and the people supported around the world. In 2024, GCSP and DCAF made concrete contributions to the UN's Pact for the Future and supported Switzerland's work at the Security Council, while the GICHT played a key role in drafting the Siem Reap Angkor Action Plan on landmines, linking mine action to food security, gender equality, and sustainability. They stand with countries in conflict. GCSP developed practical ceasefire tools for Ukraine, while DCAF trained armed forces to uphold humanitarian law. The GICHT convened mine action partners on Gaza in Amman, coordinating safer approaches in one of the world's most complex crises. They advanced inclusion. DCAF supported gender equality as a key part of the modernization and police reform from Honduras to the Gambia. GICHT worked with South Sudan to ensure its new mine action strategy addressed the needs of all communities. In Geneva, the centers connected global leaders through the International Gender Champions Network. They tackle emerging challenges. Together, the centers explore how AI, climate resilience, and cybersecurity can be governed responsibly. From global conferences in Geneva to new guidance launched at COP29. Initiatives like the GICHT's Innovation Hub and GCSP's Creative Spark turn ideas into practical solutions. Together, they translate Swiss values, neutrality, democracy, humanitarian action into real solutions, making them key actors in international Geneva. Peace is a collaborative process that is possible when people feel secure and heard, when grievances are settled peacefully and justly, when institutions are effective, accountable, transparent, and inclusive. International Geneva and the 3 centers play a vital role by convening and training key stakeholders, providing safe spaces for dialogue, and offering evidence-based policy advice, all with the people at the center. Thank you to all our partners and generous donors who have made this possible. DCAF, GICHT, and GCSP work for a world where people live safely and with dignity, where peace is sustainable, inclusive, and just, driving a mission to protect our future.
Ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues and friends, it's my honor and pleasure to speak to you as chair of the Geneva Peacebuilding Platform, a knowledge hub that connects the critical mass of peacebuilding actors, resources, and expertise here in Geneva. But I would also want to speak on behalf of the 3 Geneva centers, that is the Geneva Center for Security Policy, the Geneva Center for Security Sector Governance, known as DCAF, and the Geneva International Center for Humanitarian Demining. And they celebrate important anniversaries this year, as has been alluded to. We are meeting here in the beating heart of the Geneva Peacebuilding platform, the Maison de la Paix, home to the three centers, as well as to the Graduate Institute and Principles for Peace, and in its immediate neighborhood, Interpeace. Such organizations are a living example of peace in action. It's worth briefly recalling the history of GCSB, GICHD, and DCAF. They were established in the second half of the 1990s as Switzerland's contribution to fostering peace and security in the dramatic post-Cold War period. It was part of redefining neutral Switzerland's foreign and security policy in a more cooperative way as the country came out of the Cold War. 30 years later, we find ourselves in another turbulent period. Multilateralism is under stress. International institutions are being challenged or bypassed. Violent conflicts abound. Resources for peace and humanitarian action are shrinking. Democracy is in decline. New threats and challenges, especially those from technologies, are emerging faster than many expected. New actors are becoming involved in peacemaking. The nature of conflicts is changing, necessitating new responses. It's not the world that most of us would have wanted, but it is what it is, and we must adapt. And that is where the three centers and Geneva-based institutions in general can be helpful. Helpful by building capacity for thousands of people in peace, security, and humanitarian action all over the globe every year. By assisting authorities in building security institutions that are effective, safe, transparent, inclusive, and accountable. By developing standards and promoting global governance from humanitarian demining and new types of weapon systems to cooperation in outer space. By carrying out cutting-edge applied research and providing evidence-based policy advice in increasingly complex and interconnected security and humanitarian environments. As a knowledge hub on issues affecting international peace and security, and by strengthening networks of peace practitioners with truly global reach. In all of this work, even if it is sometimes highly technical, we put human beings at the center of our efforts. And we underline the need for inclusive and for cooperative approaches. But we can do more. The three centers, the Geneva Peacebuilding Platform and International Geneva more broadly, can strengthen multilateral cooperation and rules-based approaches in a world where transactionalism and unilateralism are dominant, and international law, human rights, and international humanitarian law are under enormous pressure. We must reinvigorate Geneva as a platform where the voices of victims of war and armed violence are heard and humanitarian principles are promoted. In a fast-moving world, we need to be an innovation hub, an incubator of ideas to develop new approaches to emerging challenges, not least in relation to technology for peace. We need to maintain Geneva as a safe and inclusive space for dialogue on issues related to peace, security, and humanitarian action. And we need to keep International Geneva linked up to other UN headquarters, such as New York, Nairobi, and Vienna. But also to unite different stakeholders for peace, from civil society, the private sector, governments, and international organizations. This is good for Geneva. this is good for Switzerland and it's good for the world. Colleagues, in a world of chaos and crisis, it is nice to have at least 1 week dedicated to peace. I therefore encourage you to make the most of the 96 or so events going on over the next few days, to engage in debates, to test new ideas, and make new contacts. And play your own part in putting peace into action. Thank you, and have a great Geneva Peace Week.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Greminger, for including us in the celebration of the work of the 3 centers, and congratulations on your achievement. Many people have said that international law is dead. It's true. There is great concern because of the scale of the violations that have taken place in recent armed conflicts committed by either state or non-state armed actors, and the difficulty to enforce the norms that leaves us with a feeling of helplessness. But it would be wrong to underestimate the power of law. It takes time and compromises to reach understandings, to mend broken societies and achieve a state of peace. Law and politics have different rhythms which create frustrations. Although one thing is certain, international law is an instrument for peace, if not its very foundation. To deliver the 2025 peace message, I have the honor to call on stage Mr. Pierre Kreinbühl, Director General of the International Committee of the Red Cross.
Dr. Bellal, dear Anissa, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, it is a great honor to address you on the occasion of the 2025 Geneva Peace Week. Thank you for the invitation. Thank you for the opportunity. The organization I represent was born on a battlefield over 160 years ago, which might go some way towards explaining why we are so attached to the issue of peace. And yet, we are living in deeply unsettling times, and we're witnessing a troubling trend. And that is the return to a normalization of war. It may seem paradoxical to state this on a day like today, when seeing some respite in the Gaza Strip and the release of hostages and detainees. And while these are evidently important pieces of good news, and my colleagues on the ground, as others, have worked tirelessly towards that result, I must also be very honest about some of our wider concerns. And they start with the fact that as human beings, we are often exceedingly casual when it comes to war. We go through a very predictable cycle as human beings, the first stage of which is very often and all too frequently the glorification of war. We behave as if wars were inevitable, and thus, as a result, fail to respond to them and their consequences robustly enough. This is leading us to a return of war as what would appear to be a first resort in settling disputes among nations, peoples, and communities. And we are far away from what was intended under the UN Charter to be a very last and very rare result. Yet, for many of us in this room, but also even more so outside of this room, the human cost of war
is all too familiar. And this is certainly the case for the many colleagues of the ICRC and of the Red Cross and Red Crescent family around the world, whether in Sudan, in Gaza, in Ukraine, and the Democratic Republic of Congo, or beyond. War is often very difficult to describe, despite the efforts in some of the remarkable documentaries, films, articles, or even books and other narratives that we might have been confronted with in our lives. But wars are not about acronyms of white fighting forces and of the shifting of front lines. War, from the perspective of an organization like the ICRC, is always about its human cost. It is about the moment where you arrive at the hospital in the aftermath of an airstrike in search of your son or of your daughter, uncertain whether he or she will have survived through the night. It is about when you are led down an empty and cold corridor, blindfolded and hearing only the screams of other inmates tortured in the cells nearby. It is about the choices that you have to make as parents in the moment when you have to flee the advancing forces of the adversary and have to choose the few belongings that you might take with you as you prepare for exile without knowing how long that exile might last. In addition to the proliferation of conflict that has already been mentioned in earlier remarks, in our daily work, we witness another dangerous trend, and that is the growing permissiveness, the growing permissive interpretation of international humanitarian law. As Dr. Bilal said, the very rules that were meant to protect life and dignity in times of war. Here, we're confronted with the second stage of this strange cycle that human beings go through. So after the glorification of war comes the phase of dehumanizing the other, the opponent, the adversary, the enemy. In other words, declaring the other inhuman leads us down the path precisely that leads to the justification of every possible atrocity and violation. And this is a crucial element in the process, because in order to justify the extremes of violence inflicted on others, one has to begin the process of dehumanization of the other. And this deliberate undermining or eroding of international humanitarian law as a framework applicable in wars overlooks that these rules are the very legacy of one of the darkest chapters in the history of humankind, World Wars I and II, but also all the processes and the conflicts that took place during periods of national liberation wars, of decolonization processes. We have inherited at the end of those processes these minimal rules that apply in times of war and seek the preservation of life and human dignity in the most challenging of times. And it is also essential to understand that although those rules apply in war, the way you respect or violate them says a lot about how you will choose to emerge from the war itself. When rules are respected in times of war, when prisoners are treated well, when civilians are protected, there will still be suffering. But the way one emerges from the conflict will be easier, and respect of IHL is actually a pathway that prepares to a resumption of war, of the dialogue. And if you look today at the war in Gaza and what has happened in this atrocious conflict, we can easily imagine what it will mean and how much strength it will take for people to sit at the same table again, because sit they will. So the number of conflicts is growing and the abuses are widespread, coinciding with a time when structured mechanisms to prevent war or to resolve them are few and far between. I think we can all and should all agree that if what we have witnessed over the past 2 years in the Gaza Strip tells us anything about the future of war, then it is our very humanity that is at stake. And I must say that we constantly underestimate the consequences that wars have. So we like to think of conflicts as ending at a certain time and then a return to a form of normalcy, when in fact, people's lives have been devastated, the traumas will be carried into generations beyond, which again leads me to say we deal with wars and their consequences far too casually. A few days ago, I spoke to our team in Gaza, just simply to thank them for the extraordinarily courageous work that they have carried out. And one of my colleagues said, her words were, "We are beyond resilience. In fact, we don't want to hear the word anymore. We are barely surviving." And this reminded me indeed that the words we use to label suffering or the situation in armed conflicts, they matter. And it reminded me that there is no virtue or beauty in admiring somebody's resilience. We all have resilience that helps us to cope with and survive the inevitable and inescapable trauma of life. There's nothing inescapable and inevitable about the horrors that were unleashed after the 7th of October throughout the Gaza Strip. And we should not applaud anybody for being simply resilient in the face of a situation that we can change. And that is why we must believe in action to bring about change, not simply to look at people who want to be more than resilient. They want to live normal lives, dignified lives, raise their children, study, and work. And among the most extraordinary things we see in the Gaza Strip, in Sudan, in the Democratic Republic of Congo, and many other places, is not so much resilience, it is courage. The courage of those who get up every morning and do the right thing, to care for others, to rebuild, to preserve hope, even when everything around them falls apart. And in parallel, even far away from the front lines of the conflicts, we see a growing trend of civilian courage, a courage born from indignation of many. And the horrors witnessed in Gaza have shown us that the people are not numb, that they are not indifferent. They are taking their voices to the streets, asking their governments to act, mobilizing, creating, organizing events, sailing into harm's way and making their outrage heard. At the ICRC, we translate our indignation into humanitarian action. This too requires courage. Last year was the deadliest year on record for humanitarian workers in Gaza, Ukraine, Sudan, and beyond. But if there is one thing that the world needs more of today, it is political courage. I hear a lot about the determination stated by political actors, quote, to not ever again speak to the other side. I can assure you, in my many years of experience of working in conflict zones, there is no courage in the refusal to talk to the other side. And it seems that we always need, first of all, to plunge into the abyss before we become wiser again at the other end and promise once more, never again. The question only being, how many times in human history do we have to promise never again, only to go there again? And while I am a strong believer in the importance of humanitarian action in times of conflict, I am, as all my colleagues are, thirsty for new ideas, new approaches when it comes to preventing wars, negotiating peace, and preserving it. And here, this is not only because it's urgently necessary, but because it is possible. And if we were a little bit less casual about wars themselves, if we were a little bit less rapid in concluding that they are inevitable, we would realize that speaking about peace and acting to create it is not an illusion, It's not idealistic, it's an absolute necessity. And at the heart of this is our responsibility to ensure that we struggle every single day to rediscover the humanity in the other. Many thanks.
Thank you very much, Director General Krenbuhl, for this very inspiring peace message. Now is the time for a moment of healing with some music. It is my great pleasure to welcome on stage the Izandi Wizards, a music collective who has traveled all the way from Cape Town, South Africa, just for us tonight. Their performance and the musicians will be introduced by DJ Simbad, a well-respected international musician who is regularly invited to play at the Montreux Jazz Festival, the Worldwide Festival, and many places around the planet. Welcome.
We're very delighted and very honored to be in Geneva for this amazing ceremony of opening for the Geneva Peace Week. It's the first time that we're actually performing outside South Africa as a new project. Let me introduce the amazing Asemahle Choloba. An incredible other musician with us tonight, Rathu van Skalkve. As the time kind of passes, we haven't got that much. It's not going to be a full concert, obviously, and we have some musicians missing because they couldn't take the flight. But we're still very happy to do a few songs for you. So let's do this.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you guys enjoy the next song that we're about to do. It's entitled Yakalinkomo by Winston Mankunkungozi. And before we start, I'd actually like to give a little synopsis of the song. I wrote something down because my memory. Yakalinkomo, it loosely translates to the bellowing sound of a bull, or the bull bellows. And it is the final cry of the bull on its way to slaughter. So Winston Mankunkungozi used this powerful metaphor for the collective grief and anguish of Black South Africans during apartheid. It symbolized the pain and suffering of a people being victimized in silence. And while it sounded like a rural, innocent song, or a phrase rather, to the white senses, Black audiences understood its deeper meaning, which was a symbol of protest and a cry of a Black man's pain. And I hope you guys enjoy it. Thank you. Yeah, le, 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 le. Oh, yeah, Iakala, 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 Inkomo. Iakala, 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 Inkomo. Sabu Inkomo.
emasimini echakula amathole qibitheka wathi mama yakhala inkomo uyinkomo emasimini echakula amathole qibitheka wathi mama yakhala inkomo zisanamcaba zisani Shamakula slabe mame Kalumama Kalunina Kalizinja Kalingoma Kalunina Kalizinja Kalungoma Iyakhala inkomo iyakhala inkomo iyakhala inkomo Lama qabaqabimbo laqhatha amagqirha aqeqeshwe ezingqondweni Lama qabaqabimbo laqhatha amagqirha aqeqeshwe ezingqondweni amadoda ayoyika Lama qabaqabimbo laqhatha amagqirha aqeqeshwe ezingqondweni igqirha lendlela kuqongqothwane igqirha lendlela kuqongqothwane igqirha lendlela kuthiwa nguqongqothwane igqirha lendlela kuthiwa nguqongqothwane Seleqobele gqitha nguqongqothwane Seleqobele gqitha nguqongqothwane Seleqobele gqitha nguqongqothwane Seleqobele gqitha nguqongqothwane igqirha lendlela kuthiwa nguqongqothwane igqirha lendlela kuthiwa nguqongqothwane igqirha lendlela kuthiwa nguqongqothwane igqirha lendlela kuthiwa nguqongqothwane sele qobe legqitha phaa 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 nguqongqothwane igqirha lendlela nguqongqothwane igqirha lendlela kuthiwa nguqongqothwane.
Thank you. We have Brethi van Schaik on the keys and Simber on the saxophone. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. We shall be back in a short time, hopefully.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, the Zande Wizards. That was so beautiful. And we do look forward to listening to one more song a bit later. Now it is time to turn to our debate. To answer some of the most pressing questions, going from the most acute armed conflicts to the crisis of multilateralism, we invited the 6 board members of the Geneva Peacebuilding Platform, who are highly experienced diplomats, peace builders, and academics. Our distinguished panelists are Ambassador Thomas Graminger, President of the Board and Executive Director of the GCSP, Mrs. Hiba Casas, Founding Executive Director of Principles for Peace, Ambassador Tobias Privitelli, Director of the Geneva International Center for Humanitarian Demining, Ambassador Nathalie Chouard, Director of DCAF, the Geneva Center for Security Sector Governance, and Itonde Kakoma, President and CEO of Interpeace. The debate will be moderated by Professor Achim Venman, Director for Strategic Partnerships and representing the Geneva Graduate Institute. All welcome on stage.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Geneva Peace Week. And we wish you all very fruitful exchanges, of course. And we want to go straight in. The theme is peace in action. And there has been a lot of action taking place today. And Hiba, you work a lot at this part of the world, in the Middle East. Security landscapes are changing. Peace in action. What do you see? What's the hope for peacemaking?
Well, thank you very much, Akim, and it's a pleasure to join you today. And what a timing, Anissa, for this edition of the Geneva Peace Week. I think those of us who follow the Middle East very closely, and those of us who have families in the Middle East very closely, today is a very significant and important day on a number of fronts, because today was the display of potentially the ushering of something fundamentally new. And, you know, when people talk about an inflection point in the Middle East, so many people laugh or smirk or say, heard that before, it's not going to happen. But truly, this could be a significant inflection point. Today, in the statement of President Donald Trump at the Knesset, he talked about a new dawn for the Middle East, a new era of political security, cooperation, a new political and security arrangements. And now all our eyes are on Sharm el-Sheikh, where a number, more than 25 leaders from around the world are gathering at head of state and head of government level to discuss how we can bring this new moment. I want to follow, because I'm not going to talk. I think you've done so much justice to what's happening on the ground and all the reasons why we need to also be cynical and very worried about the next stage. But you talked about about also why we need to have the courage to fight that cynicism. So I'm going to start from that point and try and paint a picture of where the opportunity lies today to complement your very capable address on where the challenges are. I think there are three things to keep in mind why this is a new moment. The first is that what we're seeing today is realignment of alliances and a serious alignment of incentives between very unlikely actors of the Middle East. No one would have thought that we would hear in the Knesset President Trump talking about a deal with Iran. Today it happened and he got applause for it. No one thought that in the first trip of President Trump to the Middle East, when he went to Saudi Arabia, that he would be shaking hands with Ahmed al-Shara and lifting sanctions on Syria. And no one thought that one of the first reactions that would come out of today's from President Aoun talking about that the only way forward with Israel is through negotiations. So we are in a very uncharted territory right now, but we can think of three key moments that if we just go back a little bit to see what's been happening, which I think for us coming here to talk about Geneva and talking about the Geneva Peace Week, we need to keep in mind that we are in a new era of multilateralism that is really punctuated by transactionalism, by strong alignment on economic and security incentives, but somehow it's cooperative. And I'll make the case for that. If you think of the atrocities that has been unfolding in Gaza and the continuation of the war, and after, of course, October 7th, two populations in trauma, et cetera, if you think about the impact it had globally and how that triggered different kind of momentum, one that was led through the Global Alliance for the Implementation of the Two-State Solution with significant leadership from President Macron together with Saudi Arabia. And that was geared towards preserving the idea of a two-state solution. That's one side. Next to it is another kind of movement. There's almost a division of labor. Very interesting. The other movement is around those who are working towards the ceasefire arrangement in Gaza and those who are trying to align in creating a different kind of alliance with the US that complements or work in parallel with the alliance between the US and Israel. And that's Qatar, that's Egypt, that's Jordan, that's also some of the Gulf players that have been investing in the relationship and economic interests with the US. And that has put all its energy around pressuring the two parties, Hamas and Netanyahu, to agree with this moment. And the third layer is a very different kind of diplomacy, which is spearheaded by Donald Trump. And that is something that is not so comfortable for us. It's a proof that bullying can work. It's a proof that realpolitik, the hardest, most transactional way, actually goes with this notion of give war a chance, or war is the first and chosen resort. So I think we are in this moment now where we're seeing these different alignments. We're seeing that this is not only about Gaza, this is somehow an opportunity for us to collectively push for a new political and security framework, an economic cooperation framework that does not only bring an end to this horrendous war, but actually can chart a political pathway also to Palestinian statehood, because that's a fault line that no matter how much people think that they can ignore it and go around it, it's not going to work. And at the same time, usher a new kind of transactional multilateralism that is a lot more layered, networked, and connected.
Thank you so much. So peace in action, if I may paraphrase, requires that very intricate architecture of different spaces, different actors, multiple actors, investing really all their energy to push parties from the bullying to the very tightly coordinated backdoor diplomacy, back channels and so forth. And surely, Thomas, back channels is something that you know something about. In another part of the world, with respect to the Ukraine-Russia war, there are multiple architectures that are trying to deconflict this conflict. Do you see that there could be a similar dynamic coming up, like what we see in the Middle East right now? Is there some kind of infusion of energy in this conflict too by President Trump or others?
Well, definitely not for the time being. So I think this momentum towards ending hostilities in Ukraine, ending Russia's war against Ukraine, that was created by the Anchorage summit. This is clearly gone. Parties seem still to believe that they can gain more favorable positions on the battleground. We see militarily hardly any restraint. On the contrary, if you look at what is happening in terms of missile and drone warfare into the depth of enemy territory, this was clearly on the increase in recent weeks. This said, there was a call by President Zelensky last night to President Trump, congratulating him on the Gaza peace deal and expressing his hope that once implementation of this peace deal is off to a good start, he would then refocus his attention on Ukraine, on European security. And while, I don't think that bullying alone will lead to sustainable results in conflict resolution. I'm at the same time, I'm convinced that US leverage is absolutely fundamental if we want to get the parties again to re-engage in dialogue, if we want to make them return to the negotiation table and finally start negotiating both, about modalities of a ceasefire and that's the tricky thing, at the same time, the principles of a conflict resolution. Now, this said, even though political attention is currently not on Ukraine, we at our center, we continue with our track 2 diplomacy work. I would say we continue at full speed. We just had a few days ago, again, a dozen leading ceasefire experts present here in Geneva to deepen our work on the ceasefire modalities after we got feedback, including by the parties themselves. We have, now that we saw a couple of months ago, the pace of the diplomatic process picking up, we started convening our back channel also virtually. And we focus, for instance, quite closely on this issue. How can you, in designing a process, how can you design a process that would allow you to negotiate both ceasefire modalities and the principles of a conflict resolution at the same time? And I think that's currently, one of the contradictions that you see between the parties. And finally, we have also continued to work on, our peace matrix. That is an attempt to think through building blocks that would allow us to reconstruct European security once there is an end to hostilities in Ukraine. We have started bringing insights of a 3-year track 2 process to major capitals. And, there hasn't been much thinking, of the day after, right? And so on European security as well. And so we're trying to kind of make this discussion, kick off this discussion in a way.
I'm pretty curious, one very quick follow-up question. Give us a sense how many actors and institutions are really involved in these kind of exchanges and the back channel. What's the scale of the discussions we're talking about?
Well, the trick about back channels, they're very confidential and we know little about them. To my knowledge, after running ours for 3.5 years, I think there are 2 serious back channels. One is, ours is one of them.
But good. But in terms of when you look at the broader experience of the engagement, and perhaps also you can say a few words. I mean, we're talking peace in action. I mean, these are multiple dozens of actors that have to be coordinated. What can you say about the notion of scale? here about the amount of institutions involved?
Look, if you do track to diplomacy, you have to be very modest about what you can achieve. I think you can bring experts together to the table that are very close to their governments. You can make them discuss narratives, confidence building measures, approaches to resolve the conflict. But this will always depend on the political environment, the receptivity of what they bring back to their capitals. Will very much depend. And this is also something that we have observed in the last 3.5 years in our back channel. There were moments where clearly there was a much greater openness to discuss, for instance, also conflict resolution. And there were moments where we could hardly discuss confidence building measures. So, you don't operate in a vacuum. You're very much also dependent on the political climate that is around. And so, this leads me to be quite modest in terms of ambitions.
Modesty of ambition, I think that's very clear for the action, even though we have to be courageous and forward-looking. We need these architectures. We need architectures, bigger architecture for the big diplomatic processes that are mutually supportive. We need what you say, discretion, secrecy, to be able to keep some of the most impactful processes, but also, and Natalie, I'm looking to you for this, a lot of technical work behind the scenes. Your organization is 25-year-old. You're doing this now as an institution for over 25 years with some very complicated actors sometimes. Would you like to share your piece in action?
Yes, with pleasure, and good evening, everyone. I'm very happy to be here with my fellow colleagues of the GPP. I think perhaps before doing that, if you allow me, I think it was very important to recognize where we are today in the world. And I think lots has been said by indeed the Director General of ICRC and by my colleague Iba. It's a very complex situation. It generates so many feelings around that. But what sounds really important to me, or seems really important, is all this deficit of trust that we are seeing all over the world. And out there, when I go and meet our partners, our other actors, they don't talk about peace, indeed. They really talk about national defense. And I think that's really the main preoccupation right now. I mean, Pierre, you spoke about the normalization of war, but I think national defense is really the key element at a time when investment in peace building is really barely 0.5% of what we use in terms of military spending, and it's going down. So in that respect, what it is peace in action for us, and I think first of all, as actor of peace, and we are all here actor of peace, we have really a responsibility to advocate for people-centered security and approaches. We heard that also earlier. So when our security is making such a comeback, we have to make it clear that it is not hard security instead of human security. And militarized responses cannot bring alone the responses or bring peace. And I think we really need to be clear that security means much more than defending borders. It is really about justice, it is about opportunities, and it is above everything around trust. And it's really, for me, the key words of peace in action. And if there is something that I want to convey as a message tonight, it's really that it's really security means much more than defending borders. And when people feel seen, when they feel heard, when they feel able to shape their own future, I mean, it means also in most of the cases that a place or context is really most likely to be stable. And stability for me, and that's really what we have learned in our 25 years of existence, it's really built also from the ground up. And I mean, it's crucial to build on the existing resources, on the resilience, even if I understand it's not an easy word to use, but it's really important to build on what is existing. And I wanted to mention an example about what our team has been doing in Yemen, where we have been supporting the development of a tribal code of honor. And it's really aiming at regulating the behavior of the armed groups across political divides. And it's really an involvement with local communities. It is a Yemeni-led approach that encourage really this deep local ownership. And it's important also, it's complementary to other support to this process, to other effort, including the UN-led process. So why it is important? I think it's important for three reasons. It's important because it prevents escalation. It's important because it gradually rebuilds the trust between the communities, and it also lays the groundwork for the post-conflict reconstruction. So now, how, and if we want to look at how we can enable peace, I think there are a couple of ingredients that are important that we have seen, and I think probably some of my colleagues will speak about that as well, but it's really having this all of society engagement. Inclusion, and we heard that already today, is how we move from protecting power to empowering people. And so that means that the women, the youth, marginalized group have a role in really shaping the security decision. And we have a slogan now, and we say it's really security must work for everyone. And I think today we see also a lot of resistance when it comes to the work that we are doing in terms of gender equality. So for me, it's also important to reiterate that. So there is really no security without inclusion, and no inclusion, obviously, without women. So the second part is also important for me to connect the dot, or to kind of building these bridges. And for me, it's building the work, the bridge between what we are doing at the local level with the communities, and also build this expertise at the central level. And these two go hand in hand. We need also, and I think that's a very important, and we see that during the Geneva Peace Week, it's about taking into account the role of the civil society, of the national human rights institution, of the parliament, because often they are the first line of defense for the democratic governance and accountability. And they play such an important role in bridging, making a bridge between government and citizen. And last but not least, and I think that goes also to what Iba was saying, we need to hear from these voices from the ground and bring these voices to the regional actors and to the forums, and really be sure that, I mean, these voices are heard, so that the conflict parties, the decision makers, can opt for win-win solution. But if you allow me, I want to say also what we have learned in 25 years, and I think that's something that is shared also by my colleagues here. Building peace or working on security sector governance, it's a long-term engagement. So our action is not always tangible. I mean, it's a bit the art of nudging. And I mean, when I think about security sector governance, it's at the same time a preventive tool, and it's also a technical solution. And that's where your question was, that help conflict resolution and peace building. So I think it's really important to put governance, inclusion, and human rights at the heart of security, because then we only make it possible that fragility gives the way to something else, and this something else being resilience, development, or dignity. So what I wanted to say is that, yes, you spoke about being modest, but I think the important thing is it takes time, it takes humility, it takes also sustained funding and political engagement, but I think it's possible, and for me it is really
temporality is important on the flow of the panel. Thank you. Important on the temporality, action now that will generate fruits much later on. But also one thing I want to pick up, which is I think important on your tribal honor code, is even though some processes are blocked, there are spaces where one can advance. So even in the most difficult situation, there are always opportunities for peace, I think. And mine action is, I think, exactly one of these opportunities. Even though if no one can agree on anything, everyone can agree, oh, mines are not a good idea. And that's, of course, what your organization is about.
Thank you so much. I hope you're right. First of all, I would like to echo a little bit what Pierre Krenbühl said tonight. I think his narrative exactly the right narrative when we speak about war. So we should not normalize war, we should not glorify, and it's always the end point and linked to political intentions we should not forget about. It's a man-made problem. So yes, we are on the humanitarian side of things. We see the impact of war. We see the survivors. We see the victims. Does everybody agree that landmines are bad? I would say yes, most people do, but we still have 10 to 12 countries in the world which are producing landmines. Russia is using 13 different types of landmines in Ukraine. So yes, we have the other side also using and seeing it as a military useful tool. Now, the role of Geneva potentially is, in my view, that we have this sensitivity, this openness to the victims, to the survivors. We listen to them, they are being heard usually here in these contexts. And then we try to establish at least a minimal set of rules. The Ottawa and Oslo Convention are part of these minimal setup, and they were created, as you know, in the 90s, early 2000s. I would say the Ottawa Convention is probably one of the most robust instruments of disarmament, with a lot of shortcomings. But since the ratification, 55 million mines on stockpile have been destroyed. Many countries, most countries, stopped the production and transfer of landmines. We also saw that the number of incidents went back by 75%. So much less incidents, much less deminers killed, civilians killed. I think it is a success story. Now, what are signs of hope? Very difficult in a time where we have more violent conflict, more victims of landmines, a greater area contaminated. I mean, Ukraine is the biggest contaminated land with 130,000 square kilometers contaminated. But at the same time, we also see massive and successful efforts. In Syria, as I would say, a local initiative, a new mine action center has been created recently. And it is launched by locals. The white helmets are integrated into these efforts. And it is an attempt to at least estimate the contamination in the entire country and to coordinate efforts in the entire country. And it's one of the most contaminated countries. Then we have Gaza, where in the peace plan, we have one point related to mine action, rubble removal, gives some hope because it has not been possible to do any significant mine clearance in Gaza so far, except for a few small streets leading to points of humanitarian assistance. And then we have also a country like Lebanon. Lebanon, in a very difficult situation, has established one of the most developed mine action centers in the world in the last 30 years. And then we have, for instance, the situation of Thailand, Cambodia. Demarcation at certain points of the border is not clear, disputed, and Thailand claims Cambodia has used new landmines. So what gives me hope is that both countries refer to the Ottawa mechanism, Article 8.2, right? So the mechanisms are here, they're being respected. Every country which was not able to clear the land, not able to destroy landmines fully, is asking for extension requests. So the mechanisms are here, more or less respected, and that gives me some hope. Thank you.
And this also what was said by Anissa, I think, in the very opening, is the role of international law as this indispensable web of making sure that things don't get worse, or that there is a handrail for identifying how one can really prevent the worst. So that's, I think, very important. Itonde, Interpeace, your work on peace, handrails, and not just for as experience of Interpeace, but you've been involved in so many peace processes in action. Where do you see the pioneering of work in our community? Where does it have to go?
Thank you, dear Achim, and to colleagues. I would say the following. Number one, many of the armed conflicts we see occurring today, while taking on new forms of horrific means in the conduct of hostilities, are not new necessarily in their origins. That is to say, many of them have their historical antecedents that have been unresolved, perhaps paused through various means, but the core underpinnings, root causes, have not been addressed and thus inherited or a part of a continuum on an intergenerational scale. And this has everything to do also with the quality and innovation of peace that's required, that takes into account the intergenerational cycles of war, which are further compounded, particularly if basic norms in the upholding of international law are not observed. So this raises further challenges for us in terms of what do more durable investments, efforts in the advancement of peace look like for the future, current and for the future. I would say at minimum, any peace agreement, any settlement that is imposed from the outside may bring about a temporary kind of ease, but unless reflecting the nuances in historical, sociopolitical, and political economy of the impacted states and communities, will not endure. And it's a matter of time before they erupt again, which enables us now, at this moment of drastic change and the shifting of policies by states, to uphold some of the very institutions that have been designed to pursue agenda of durable peace, who are also going through a seismic change. It's forcing us to be innovative. And here, it's not a panacea, but we have to take it seriously. States no longer enjoy a monopoly of power in military, in economy, in communications. So the role of non-state actors becomes crucial in any future settlements, including the role of the private sector. But not as a way of saying, you handle this. No, because then we'd be losing sight of the fact that some are also perpetuating the very cycles of conflict, but in a way that responsibilizes new forms of investment that get to scale. I think the challenge for all of us as a collective, you saw the numbers of the 3 centers. You multiply that by the 2 additional institutions here, plus those around the room, the impact ability, potential is serious. It remains a potential because we haven't quite figured out how to get beyond a projectized notion of what peacemaking is about into a much more transformative agenda that requires us all to put aside individual and organizational egos into addressing fundamental challenges facing all of humanity, especially when the institutions set up to maintain international peace and security are finding it extremely difficult to have the confidence of their membership to deliver. So innovation, I don't know if that's that, but most definitely courage, clarity, and leadership with the requisite humility, as you rightly pointed out, to do so together.
And to do so together is, I think, the word I would use to say a few words about our role as the Geneva Graduate Institute in the partnership of the Geneva Peacebuilding platform. What you have already heard is a lot of different types of perspective, expertise of where expertise comes from, what organizations do. Academia is a part of that. And we have, since nearly 20 years, been a founding member. We've been 20 years at Anissa? Yeah, nearly. Okay, founding member. And we found that one of the most lasting contributions to peace is to train the new generation. And doing this now for nearly 10 years, I am very proud to see our students having the courage and standing up for peace. And I'm very happy that our students are here today. Can you please say hi where you are? Yes, exactly. So this is the contribution of Geneva Graduate Institute, plus all the research, plus the academic space. There is a reason why many peace processes require independent analytical spaces as a safe space to discuss, to bring parties together, to have a common understanding of what doesn't work, what is the problem, what you mentioned, Itonde, what are the root causes. And academics have a professional ethics to do that. And this is, I think, where we as a Graduate Institute, together with a partnership with the Geneva Peacebuilding platform, are very proud in this open partnership for exchange. And we're also very proud because we are doing this in the Maison de la Paix from Geneva for Switzerland and for the world. There could be at least another dozen actors who could sit here who are other partners in the Maison de la Paix. There could sit another 24 of actors who are our partners in international Geneva. And I think this is the type of spirit, going beyond ourselves and our own institutions in a time that needs so much peace. And there, I think we as a university, as a university that has the spaces to bring us all together, we have a role to play. And I'm very proud that we can do this together. Now, see Anissa is getting up, which means we're done. But I would just very aggressively, I would ask two of you one question. We're all sitting in Geneva. We have nice suits on. We're all moderately composed. Two of you, give me a notion what some of the people you work with on peace, what do they stick you, what Geneva could do so much better in advocating for peace in action? Why don't you start?
I will say a few words. One of our initiatives brings more discreetly, more than 500 leaders from business, security, media, politics, from the Middle East, working around a regional political and security framework. And I can tell you one thing, they tell me that Geneva does add value significantly in providing a discrete platform for dialogue and action that goes beyond ticking the box. So I just want to say something a bit controversial. I don't know why I decided today this is my role, but I'm going to say it anyway. We need to break from this dichotomy of top down, bottom up, the grassroots and the elite processes. We need to go into an ecosystem approach of looking at power, politics, and incentives, and really targeting that missing middle of various actors on the peace, security, and private sector. We can do that in Geneva. We need to help the ecosystem learn, adapt, and evolve. And many of our organizations who are designed for this purpose, that's our value added and contribution.
Perfect. Telegraphically, Thomas, and then Nat.
Yeah, Geneva is still the place where you can create these safe spaces for non-like-minded people getting together. And I think New York is it less and less. And I think Geneva has managed to kind of maintain this capacity of creating these safe spaces. And I think that's something we can be proud of, but that's something also that we should use even more proactively.
Thank you. And Nat.
Yeah, I really do think that the special thing about Geneva is the link to the field. And I mean, we need really to link this expertise, this perspective that we have on the ground with the wider discussion, especially here in Geneva. And in Geneva, what is also special is really this multi-stakeholder approach and having really government, but also civil society, oversight actors that are being here and sharing view about the situation. But also, I think that not only it builds the trust in the international system, I think that when you bring all these different actors together, it also make it possible to bring some solutions that are both principled and pragmatic.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Anissa. Thank you for your patience. Enjoy Geneva Peace Week. Enjoy the week. And thank you very much for the illustrious panel. Thank you.
Thank you very much to all the panelists for having shared with us your knowledge and expertise, and also providing examples of concrete action points. We're nearing the end of our opening ceremony, but before this, I wanted to invite once again musicians, Isandi Wizards on stage for one more song. Then we'll have the youth message also after that. So please, Isandi Wizards.
Thank you so much. We return with a song that speaks to faith, not just religious faith, but belief in humanity. The Creator has a master plan, reminds us that even through the chaos, love and peace is still possible, but that won't happen on its own. It needs all of us. It needs justice in Palestine and in the Congo and everywhere in the world. It needs equality for women and the LGBTQ plus community. It needs governments that serve, not exploit, and it needs the freedom for Africans to move, create, and dream without borders. So as we sing, we invite you to hold that vision with us, a world where peace doesn't exclude anyone. Thank you.
Yeah. The Creator has a master plan. Peace and happiness for everyone. The Creator makes but one decide. Peace and happiness for everyone. The power of God, the power of God, the power of God, the power of God. The Creator has a master plan, peace and happiness for everyone. The Creator has a working plan, peace and happiness for everyone.
Is it okay if I ask you guys to join me in the song? I'm gonna teach you how to do it. That's okay? Yay? So you're gonna repeat after me. Okay. Yeah, 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 yeah. Now your turn. There we go. You guys sound good. Again. Yeah. Now it advances. Now, the power of God, the power of God, the power of God, the power of God. Too hard? I'm taking you with me to Cape Town. The Creator has a working plan, peace and happiness for everyone. The Creator has a master plan, peace and happiness for everyone. Ooh. La, 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 la. Ooh. Thank you so much. You guys sound good. Thank you. We have Brett Hugh Ponskak on the keys and Simbad, and we are the Sandy Wizards. Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you, Asemahli.
Thank you.
As was underlined by Achim before, the Geneva Peace Week could not be the same without the enthusiasm and support from our vibrant student and youth community. I would like now to give the floor to Olivia Borny, who is the co-president of the Peacebuilding Initiative at the Geneva Graduate Institute. Please, you have the last words.
Tonight, I want to share with you 3 testimonies, my personal testimonies, that highlight the role and the power that youth hold in building more inclusive, sustainable, and collective peace. Also, to inspire everyone here today in recognizing that youth are key actors in the peace-building architecture today, from Geneva and beyond. Growing up, I was always involved in community building activities. This included joining my local Girl Guides, joining my local constituency youth council, and also dancing in the local production of The Nutcracker in Cambridge, Ontario. One essential aspect to all of these character building experiences, it's the role of mentorship. At McGill University, I was matched with a seasoned professional in international security, and this gave me a transformative opportunity to ask hard-hitting questions on both my academic and professional development. And this should not be unique to my experience as a young person and young professional. We need to expand our notion of mentorship if we want young people to succeed. Mentors provide intergenerational knowledge, they improve career outcomes, and help see us in spaces that may otherwise be very difficult to access. For the professionals in the room, and there are many of you, I am calling on everyone here today to form a mentorship program in your organization where young graduates and everyone can have these opportunities. You might just empower a young person to reach their true professional opportunity and their full potential. Mentorship and empowering youth also recognizes our current roles as leaders of today, not just leaders of the future. An estimated 16% of the population is currently between 15 and 24 years of age, and this is only projected to increase to 23%, nearly a quarter of the population by 2030. This is exactly why programs and agendas, including the Youth, Peace and Security Agenda, and creating meaningful opportunities for young people to engage at every multilateral level is so important and needed. We are all global citizens, and we need to tackle these issues together, hand in hand, and as equals. Peace is a shared responsibility, and it must include access to education, health, and the ability to form relationships without fear. These are foundations of our shared humanity. It's a responsibility that everyone holds: political leaders, activists, artists, educators, and community shapers. Now is our moment to meaningfully integrate youth into peace-building processes and multilateral frameworks, not as tokens, but as leaders and trusted partners. Peace is possible, and it takes each and every one of us to recognize this. Efforts must include country-based programs for training of youth delegates, reinvestment into education for current leaders, and providing spaces for children to become champions of global citizenship. In closing, putting peace into action cannot be seen as an intangible goal, nor the task of a few particular actors or nations. It is a shared, urgent, and intergenerational responsibility. Youth are not just the promise of tomorrow. We are the power of today. Let us ensure that mentorship, meaningful inclusion, and sustained investment into young people are not the exception, but the norm. To be truly committed to building lasting peace, we must build it together in equal partnership with young leaders, and we must start now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Borny, for your strong message. And we have heard you loud and clear. We will create those mentorship programs. Thank you for the idea. Now it is the end of this opening ceremony. I would like to extend my thanks to all the speakers and musicians, to our sponsors and our supporters, including our board members. I would like also to thank the Swiss Federal Department of Foreign Affairs, as well as the state and canton of Geneva. I would like also to thank you, the public, and also those of you who are watching us online, for taking the time to share with us this important moment of Geneva Peace Week. We all invite you for a cocktail reception afterwards. I now declare the 12th edition of the Geneva Peace Week open.